Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Dr. Alberto Pombo, and I've spent the last 4 decades traveling the world's oceans as a marine biologist, an environmental scientist, and a lifelong student of how people and nature connect through water. I work on research ships, with fishing fleets, in coastal villages, and inside government agencies. I've held a US Coast Guard captain's license and spent a good part of my life figuring out how to protect our most vital resource, the ocean. This cruise is an opportunity to see the Caribbean Sea not just as a destination, but as a living, breathing system full of stories. Some are inspiring, some are alarming, but all of them are important. And over the next 45 minutes, we will journey through history to explore how the Caribbean Sea served as a major highway for trade, conquest, and conflict. From explorers to pirates to modern cargo and cruise ships, the sea was, and still is, the central character in the shaping of this region. To understand the Caribbean, we need to see the sea not just as water between islands, but as the main route that connected empires, people, and economy. We will trace how this marine highway fueled exploration, colonization, piracy, and trade, and how it still influences the region today. Why the Caribbean? The Caribbean is strategically located between the Atlantic, Central America, and Africa. It's warm, shallow, and filled with natural resources and currents that guided early ships. These features made it essential for colonial powers looking to dominate trade and expand their influences. The sea, even today, contains or is crossed by important sea lanes: Panama, Yucatan Channel, the Windward Passages. The Caribbean Sea, it's, as I say, it's located in a very specific area. What is up here? The first important characteristic of the Caribbean is that it's way within the trade winds. Trade winds are a band of winds that circulate the planet and in the northern hemisphere travels from east to west. They're kind of constant and very moderate winds. As you can see here in the symbols, this is telling you the direction that the prevailing wind arrives at this spot. The length of the shaft of the arrow will tell you how strong it is. And the little barbs at the end will tell you another idea of how strong the wind is. Each of the little barbs is 5 knots. So we have here, this is 20 knots, 25. So more or less 20, 25 knots in the same direction. Another important feature of this is the Windward Passage. So here, the ships that want to go into the Yucatan Peninsula, the Gulf of Mexico, coming from Europe or Africa, they will travel through this passage, the trade winds, and they will get into the ocean through this passage that they will have the wind on their back. So they will sail very, very nice. And it's an area with pretty much constant winds. so no problem of hitting something or it's deep, clean, no hitting a reef or going out of weight. Also, it's important here to have these currents. There are several currents that are mostly, as you can see here, around the circulate. It's a circular current around the Sea of the Caribbean Sea. This is interesting. It's very used even today. Trying to go to the islands of Panama. Once you get into the Gulf of Mexico, the important here was Veracruz, the important port. As you can see here, the wind starts to, it's still mostly from the same direction, but there are several variations here. Outside the band, this of the northwest, the trade winds, this is telling you that the wind is coming from very different directions, so you have to be very careful here. Sailors, what they did was when they went into the Caribbean Sea, when they reached Veracruz or wherever it is that they went, when they wanted to return to Europe, they did return using the Gulf Current. The Gulf Current that, well, we all know that is a very important, strong current that will take you pretty much next to Europe. Why the early, okay. After Columbus and as Columbus, or as he signed his name, Cristobal Colón. When I went to Sevilla in Spain, I was able to see a letter of him, a letter signed by him, and clearly says Cristobal Colón. It was a very strong emotion to be able to see such a very important navigator signing a paper, being there, looking at across a paper and say, "Whoa, this guy did actually exist," and that was very important. So after Columbus travels, he did 3 travels. He opened the door to European colonization. After that, once they knew that there were islands, once they knew that there was a continent, place to go, Spain mostly start to send more and more and more ships, and they start to discovering treasures, money. I mean, it was a major loot that they did in the continent. Once they discovered gold in Panama, Colombia, Central America, Costa Rica, Yucatan Peninsula, they start to send their goods, I mean, gold, silver, precious stones, to Europe using fleets, treasure fleets. We will talk a little bit about them later. This became a main highway in the ocean to send to Europe sugar, gold, silver, and coming from Africa, slaves. So the ocean, the Caribbean Sea, became a very important trading route. After all the wealth of Spain, after all that money going through the Caribbean Sea, they began to, other European countries began to be interested. England, France, the Netherlands, and wanted to control that trade. The only way of doing it was trying to attack those trade routes. That in turn created a dispute, and there were several fortresses built from the Spanish side to protect their vessels, their fleets, and from the pirates, or from the England, France, the Netherlands. They tried to protect their fleets with the islands that they were be able to control. The tool that the non-Spaniards used to fight the Spanish power was by using something that is called privateers. Those privateers were individuals or ships authorized by the governments via a letter of marque to attack enemy vessels during wartime. Pirates, on the other hand, were outlaws who attacked ships for personal gain without allegiance to any nation. In other words, they were freelancers. The privateers, somehow, they represented one power of the time. The document that a government like the British Crown or French Crown signed with the individual was called Letter of Marque and Reprisal. We have them in our museums, libraries, archives. It was a legal license to plunder enemy ships. It was used by nations like England, France, Spain, the Netherlands. And later, this system was used by the colonies when they started to fight for their independence. They hired again these privateers, essentially mercenaries, to fight on their side. They didn't have time. The fleets belonged to the oppressing power. That's the origin of most Latin American navies, including, it's not in Latin America, the 13 colonies. The US, America, started their navy with privateers. So privateers were very important for many years. Examples of very important privateers were, well, Sir Henry Morgan. He raided several important cities, fortresses of Spain, like Portobello, Panama, Puerto Príncipe, which is nowadays Camagüey in Cuba, Gibraltar, but Gibraltar in Lake Maracaibo, Vildemo, Trujillo, Granada in Central America, Rio de Hacha in Colombia. After many of those major raids and several battles at sea, he was appointed Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. Another very famous privateer of the time was Sir Francis Drake. He raided again cities in the Americas like Cartagena. He also raided Cadiz in Spain. He attacked several slave ships. He participated in the defeat of the Spanish Armada. At one point, he was the first English person to circumnavigate the globe between 1577 and 1580. And at the time, was the most renowned seaman of the era. Finally, at the end of his career, he served as a member of parliament for Camelford, Bossiney, and Plymouth, and held the position of mayor of Plymouth. In other words, the line between legality, illegality was kind of not clearly stated at the time. So we are going to talk with the tools that both Spanish, so we have Spanish on one side and you have this other French, English, and from the Netherlands trying to compete with each other. The money was on the Spanish side, so they used these fleets with galleons. Galleons were large, massive, multi-deck vessels built to carry large, immense amounts at the time of cargo, including gold, silver, precious stones, from the Americas to Spain. They were really heavy armed, so on top of all the cargo, they were heavy because of all the protection that they had, which was all the cannons. Their sailing setup was typically 3 masts, forward mast, and the two forward masts, the two in the front of the mast used square rigs, and the one in the back, the mizzen mast, had what is called lateen sail, which is a triangular sail. This was a very fast ship, fast ship with the wind on its back, but that lateen sail allowed the ship to have limited but still maneuverability when they had the wind in one of the sides. On the other side, there were the pirates used essentially 3 main vessels. You can think of this as a car dealer. Entry level, the pirogue or piragua. It was a canoe. Many times, many pirates began sailing in a pirogue. When things were successful, when they were having money, when they were able to loot enough money, they traded up to what is called the Bermuda sloop. The Bermuda sloop was a single-masted, with fore and aft rigging, which means triangular sails in the front and in the back. Those ships were known for their speed and exceptional maneuverability. And also remember that in the Caribbean we have coral reefs. Coral reefs around the islands. So these ships had very shallow draft. You could go through very shallow waters. You could go through coral reefs or rocks without having a wreck. And finally, imagine like going from a little Volkswagen to a pickup truck. That was a major improvement. But when things were well, when their trade was successful, they went through the luxury items, the equivalent of a Mercedes or something like that, and those were the brigantines. Brigantines were 2 masts ships that combined both the square sails and the triangular sails. which gave them very large speed, they were fast, and exceptional maneuverability too. But they were large, so they could carry large amount of cannons. The Spanish galleon. The Spanish galleon had multiple decks, large capacity, and as you can see here, so two masts, square sails, and a lateen triangular sail. They were designed to carry a lot of weight, but lots of cannons. So they were very heavily protected. It was not easy to attack them. So it's another side of, as you can see here, lots of cannons. On the pirate side, okay, entry level, the pirogue. It was a simple dugout canoe, but over time, they became larger, and eventually they were capable of sea travel with a sail. These boats are still used today. When I went from Panama to Cartagena, Colombia, through the San Blas Islands in Panama, I saw several of those. But nowadays they use an outboard engine. However, they still had oars. So after several hundred years, this is still a very seaworthy vessels. And in Africa, they are still used daily by the population in places like Madagascar. So we cannot dismiss them as easily. It was one of the favorite tools, I would say, of Henry Morgan when he sent his troop, his people through to attack Panama. Remember, Panama is in the Pacific, and he was in the Caribbean, so he had to. He attacked San Lorenzo, it's a fort, and he sent all his people to cross the Panama Isthmus, and they did in canoes. Several canoes. There were 4,000 people. It was a lot of canoes, and as I said, they are still used today in Africa. When things start to improve, they traded up for the Bermuda sloop. Again, as you can see here, this is the triangular sail, so it's fore and aft rigged. So, and sometimes they use a square sail, but the main characteristic of this was speed and maneuverability. They were extraordinary, fast and maneuverable. And because of the shallow draft, they were able to go through many of the coral reefs surrounding the islands. So it was extraordinarily smart boat. But as you can see in this depiction, there are depictions, it wasn't that large, and they couldn't carry that many cannons. The luxury island, when they were very successful, they upgraded to a brigantine. Brigantine, as you can see here, is a combination of triangular and square sails. The main characteristic of this is that they could sail fast in whatever wind they were having, and they could outmaneuver pretty much any other ship around. As you can see, but also it has a very large capacity, so they could carry a lot of guns, cannons, gunpowder, and if they were able to capture loot, large loot. In this picture here, we have the from the records a list of all the number of cannons that the different ships had. We have it went from very small, like this. George Barrow was the poorest probably of the whole lot. We have this 10 cannons. Bartholomew Roberts, we will talk about him several times. He had several, he had a fleet. And we'll talk about him later. But, for example, this famous Edward Hatch, which was a Blackbeard, his Queen Anne's Revenge had 40 cannons. This became a very famous ship during the pirate era. Some of them were very large, like this. The Rover by Howell Davis, Captain Howell Davis, had 59 cannons. 59 cannons. And there was another here, Speaker, George Speaker, 54. So it was a combination of very large, and this defines John Barrow, large ships with a very heavy artillery, and some of them were very small and they needed a particular different strategy. Why don't we have many of those ships? Most of this is based on records, books, but we today have very little of these ships. None of them almost survived. We don't have none of the three caravels of Cristobal Colon or Christopher Columbus. They all sank. When Europeans arrived to the Caribbean, they encountered this little, say, mollusk, say, relative of snails or slugs. It's called Teredo navalis. This little thing destroys wood. So it's a marine animal that, as I said, mollusk. It has a larvae that swims and eventually finds a piece of wood, attaches, and starts to penetrate the wood. The shell here in the front, two shells, are as a drill. So it's a drill bit. And they produce a lot of damage. So those ships were constantly being eaten up by this pest. Those sailors took those ships, took those Teredo navalis to Europe and pretty much the rest of the planet. Nowadays, Teredo navalis is pretty much in all the oceans, all the seas of the planet. And that's the reason why we don't have many of those survival ships. Most of those ships did not survive. Pirates, specifically. Pirates thrive on stability and the sea traffic that was very heavy. There were several famous pirates like Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and Bonnie, and Mary Read. I will talk about them a little bit later. However, the most successful captains were Bartholomew Roberts with 400 prize ships. He captured 400 ships. And the largest loot, the largest treasure ever was captured by Henry Avery. However, he didn't do it in the Caribbean, he did it in the Indic Ocean, but to run away, he, with all the loot, came to the Caribbean. And so most of his, as I say, the largest loot was in the Indian Ocean, in the Caribbean, and after this, Henry Avery, and again I will talk a little bit later, gets the myth about the big treasures and the myth about somebody hiding those treasures like in all the movies. That was very unusual, the big treasures, but in this case was true. Pirates were quite social, essentially. They did not live isolated. No, they had places where they could gather. Those were harems. And New Providence, or Republic of Pirates, in the Bahamas, guess where it is now? Nassau. Port Royal in Jamaica, that at one point was the capital, was the most important city of Jamaica, till it was destroyed by an earthquake. So now we don't have more what it was, but it was a large city, as I say. St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands, Tortuga in Haiti, is French, and Virgin Gorda in the British Virgin Islands. All of these were places where pirates could go and spend their loot. Those places they could repair their ships. There were skilled artisans that could help them. They could modify their ships. We know for sure that their ships were kind of always being modified to go faster, but we don't have the exact detail why it happened. Also, it was a place where they could have alcohol as much as they had. There were prostitution, of course, gambling. Probably that's the origin of what happens in the Bahamas stays in the Bahamas, or what happens in Port Royal stays in Port Royal. But they were large centers, very cosmopolitan centers. People of all nationalities will go there and trade money and ideas also. So probably they weren't that bad, and pirates had very strong codes that they were not completely wild. Here we have four major pirates. The most famous was Edward Teach. He used to, Blackbeard, he used to put slow burning fuses of the cannon in his beard and his below his hat, and when attacking other ships. He had very impressive demoniac figure. He was originally he had a training as a sailor, excuse me. So he knew how to navigate a boat. And he was very refined. At one point, he had a French cook to cook for him. And he always dressed very fashion clothes. He had tailors who came to his boat to cut his suits. This is a very interesting thing. There were very few women. The most famous, we don't know if they were the first, but they were famous. There were these two ladies, Anne Bonny and Mary Grade. The story here, this is soap opera. This is a pirate soap opera. Anne Bonny, she was married to James Bonny, so that's how he took it. In Jamaica, Jamaica, she met Calico Jack. We don't know exactly if in Jamaica they also met, or she also met with Mary Read. At one point, they were sailing together. Let's put the story how they met, but they were sailing together. Calico Jack wanted to buy Anne Bonny from James Bonny, and James did not want to sell her, did not accept money for that, so he stole her. No, they ran away, and in between they met with this other sailor, male sailor, and they started to talk and they liked each other, and Calico Jack became jealous of them, and eventually Anne told him, "Hey, there is no problem here. Let's get together, and I will show you what's going on." Well, when Calico Jack realized that there was a woman, he accepted, and essentially it was a triangle. They lasted not much as pirates, and when they were captured, they were all condemned to death. Calico Jack went fast first. The two ladies, they were famous swordswomen. They were very good fighters, but they were condemned to death. And they both claimed, at the time was called the belly allegiance. So they were pregnant. They claimed to be pregnant, and yes, they were pregnant. So whatever happened there, we don't know exactly what happened, but the two ladies were sent to death, to jail, because a woman, under the law of the time, could not be hanged while pregnant. They had to wait till they gave birth. Mary Read died in prison. The complications, probably with the pregnancy and some disease. The record says fever. Who knows what fever meant? But she died very shortly after she was in prison. Mary, on the other hand, she disappeared in thin air. Nobody knows. There is no record how she died, and what happens with her pregnancy. Again, nobody knows. So this is an interesting story. The other person that they mentioned was this Bartholomew Roberts. That he was a very important pirate. He was the third mate of a ship that was captured, and the pirates offered him shortly after to become the captain. So he became the captain of the ship that captured him, and he was so successful that other ships kept on joining his team, his crew, and he was famous for all the expensive clothes that he used to use, and for all the gold chains, all the things that he, even nowadays, I think that we could recognize him, even in modern times, several gold chains, expensive clothing. Probably you have an image of a present day person doing that. So what is important here is that pirates were very democratic people. They chose their leaders, and the loot was strictly divided by them. They were in very harsh conditions. They lived very short lives, diseases, violence. And well, one of the important things that was the waterborne diseases. I studied for years how to purify water. My research was mostly water sanitation for the urban poor, and those the important here is that I found in the literature that how they stay alive in those conditions. Remember that when you capture, I mean, they did get water from wells, rivers, and they put those in barrels in the deck. And after 2, 3, 4 weeks, that water was completely full of organisms. How they did kill it? Well, they mixed with rum, water, and lime juice for flavor. That combination was one of the best combinations possible. Later, the British Navy adopted that combination and they called them grog. Grog was, and it was officialized in 1742 and lasted till 1970. This combination was used by all the British Navy for many, many years, and it's perfect. The water is, the moment you add the rum, you have it's disinfected, and the lime, if you add the lime will help with the change of the pH. Another thing, so it was very effective. Another thing is that how, with such attrition rate, they have to capture other ships. So a main source of crew members were slaves. 6 out of 10 sailors of Blackbeards were slaves. Also, they captured crews from other ships, especially those with special knowledges, like carpenters, surgeons, and navigators. The flags. We all know the Jolly Roger. Ships communicate with each other with the color of their flags. A red flag, a black flag will mean surrender, we will not kill you. On the other hand, the red flag will mean if you do not surrender, we will kill all of you. Later, that black and red evolved into the Jolly Roger and the Red Jack. Those were flags that at the time were the black flag had several signs, the crossbones and everything. Okay, but by the end of the 1700s, the rise of colonial navies improved defense. So pirates were no longer needed. They were started to be attacked. Some of them were murdered, some were pardoned, but completely disappeared from the scene in a very short period of time. So nowadays, the Caribbean still remains a major shipment. Cruise ships, cargo, and fishing vessels go through the water all the time. But echoes from the past still are in ports and the sea. Places like Bahamas now, they are major ports, and they're still important today. I hope that you enjoy this, and I would have to thank you for joining me today, and I'll be happy to take questions or continue these conversations after the session. Thank you very much.